We spotted the ocean ahead of the trail. Where are we going? So far away. Somebody told me that this is the place where everything's better and everything's safe. Walk on the ocean, step on the stones, flesh becomes water, wood becomes gold. Half an hour later, packed up our things, said we'd send letters, and all of those little things knew we were lying.
So I reviewed your website and everything on there and your book. So did you want to talk, like I was interested in your epilepsy story and just being inspired by that to help others, and you know what you do for just a little quick, you know, overview of your life in 20 minutes. We don't need to go in detail, but just what you went through, especially for epileptics, to understand that there's hope out there, right?
Right.
That's what your book is about. And I got my book out as well, so I'm going to be able to, I can get you a copy as well, but it's just came out like 2 weeks ago, and I'm helping others be inspired with alcoholism, epilepsy, escapism, you know, and that's why I want to get more interviews like this with more inspiring stories.
I know in my book, I don't specify if I was so-called cured. I went back on seizure medication really 10 years ago, because I started feeling like the auras. So by medical perspective, I'm not cured, but I just take seizure medication just to control the auras. So anyway, I could say that it's just, I kind of feel, I don't know, maybe it's, I don't know if I feel awkward about it or.
I mean, because that's a really big point. That's like the point of the medication, the need for it, you know, your auras, that's hits home with me too. Hey everyone, Coach Stefan Rudolph coming to you from beautiful Reno, Nevada, out here today on a wonderful journey to see my parents and exploring more areas in the country and getting out and exploring life, growing in life, and also doing these great interviews here on Recovered Coaching and my program to help others with epilepsy, with addiction, with overcoming overall escapism sometimes in life, and being able to let you know that you're not alone in life. So I brought a wonderful guest on to discuss epilepsy today and what we have both gone through and grown through, and what she's going through and helping others when it comes to her life and the battle in the past and then overcoming obstacles right now. At this point, we've all gone through lockdown, and she has a wonderful story. This is Amy Crane. Amy, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here today.
Thank you, Amy. I really enjoyed looking through your book online. I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to. And I wanted to hear more of your story. I was inspired by you to help others. So tell us a little bit about your story and what you've done and what you've overcome in life.
Yeah, so my story started when I was an infant, actually 11 months old. I had a convulsion. I convulsed for an hour and 20 minutes. I had a fever of 106, and that is what started my epilepsy. At the end of the convulsion, the doctor told my mom, look for something unusual in Amy. And about a week later, on my first birthday, I had my first seizure. And since then, I have been on seizure medication. I went on phenobarbital as a kid, and anybody who knows anything about seizure medications, phenobarbital is a very ancient medication. There's a lot of side effects. And so as a kid, I went through the side effects of being on seizure medication that can include being drowsy, just having a slower mind. It takes maybe a little bit more time to think through things when you're on high doses of seizure medication. So as a child, I had anywhere from 1 seizure a week to 3 seizures in one day. You know, it was very inconsistent with how many seizures I had and when I had my seizures, but I had seizures at home, at school. I did play summer softball with some other girls, which was really good for me socially and emotionally, physically. My mom encouraged me to get involved in sports and in things to where I could socially and emotionally grow. She didn't want to hold me back. You know, my mom's philosophy was, you can do anything that anybody else can do.
Good.
So I had that encouragement from my mom. She did not want me to live a sheltered life as a kid with epilepsy.
That's wonderful.
And, you know, here again, I struggled academically as a child because of the epilepsy and because of seizure medication. And that was, of course, a big hindrance in my life. But even as a child, I had faith in God that He would bring me through it, and that one day that I would live a stable adult life. That was one of my fears as a child and teenager, that I wouldn't become an independent adult. And I believe that's a fear, a concern for a lot of kids with epilepsy and their parents. Parents of kids with epilepsy want their kid to eventually be independent and be successful in life.
Yeah, if I
So,
may add in there, that's the biggest part, I think, for me too, is when you have epilepsy or you have seizures, you feel like you've lost your freedom, right? You've lost
right,
your ability to be normal, I call it. You're playing
right,
around, you're going to play sports and you have a seizure and everybody's looking at you and it's tough, right?
right, it is. And on that same note, I would have more seizures when I was physically active. So out on the ball field, in the sun, in the heat, I was more prone to have seizures. So there was that risk factor in being involved in sports and being outside and in the heat and in the sun. But I wanted, and my mom wanted for me, the social aspect and being able to be with my peers and develop that way.
That's wonderful, because that's the biggest thing that helped me too. And I see it helps a lot of people, is to be more interactive. When you have somebody holding you back too, parents, or people that love you and they fear for you, then you live in fear, right? And that's wonderful to hear
Right,
your mother wanted you to get out there and be who you always could be and not let that
right,
hold you back.
right.
So what happened in later years? How long did this last and when did it shift and change for you? What happened?
So I continued having seizures throughout my teen years. I did go on to college, and you know, I continued having complex partial seizures in college. I would have grand mal seizures on occasion. And then it was my junior year in college when I went to my annual checkup with my neurologist. And, you know, I've been through many different appointments with neurologists, and it's always, you know, how many seizures have you had? Maybe we'll change your medication, increase your medication. It's always, you know, that type of conversation. But at this appointment, my neurologist said, you know, Amy, you've been on several seizure medications. No seizure medication has controlled your seizures. There is now epilepsy brain surgery for some people with your type of seizures. And if you would like, I can refer you to Cleveland Clinic or Mayo Clinic so that you can go through medical tests that would determine if you are a good candidate for brain surgery. So that was a complete shock to me that there was this opportunity to be cured of epilepsy and to have a so-called normal life. So needless to say, I did take up that opportunity, and I ended up going to the Cleveland Clinic for pre-operational testing. But I'll back up a second. So my first appointment there at the Cleveland Clinic, they said that they wanted to try me on 3 seizure medications before they would consider pre-operational testing. And that was a discouragement to me in the sense that, I had been on seizure medication all my life, and my neurologist had tried many different types of anticonvulsants. And I thought, why am I going to go through this again when I've already been on roughly 5 medications? They didn't work. So that was a big discouragement for me. But I did go through 3 different seizure medications over, I think it was 1.5 years or 2 years. And needless to say, none of those seizure medications worked. So the next stage was doing pre-operational testing.
Right.
And so I did go through stage 1, stage 2 of 3 of pre-operational testing. And I got the phone call when I was in my college dorm one day from my nurse at the Cleveland Clinic, and she said, the team of doctors that is overseeing your case met, and all of them agree that you are an excellent candidate for brain surgery. We couldn't ask for a better candidate. And I thought, wow, this is like an answer to my childhood prayer that I would one day be free of seizures, be able to live an independent life, be able to drive.
Achieving normality, I call it.
Exactly.
Just normal again. Yeah.
So from that point on, I continued my college studies. I graduated from college in May of 1994. And then in June of 94, I went through 5 hours of brain surgery. And I woke up from brain surgery knowing that I made it through brain surgery. It was one of those very amazing moments in my life when I woke up from brain surgery. I knew I was alive, and I still had that hope that one day I would be cured and that, the brain surgery would work.
Well, your 30-year anniversary is coming up, huh? What was the day? Do you remember?
It was June 17th, 1994.
Okay. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of going back to let other listeners know and viewers know, a lot of the medication that we talk about, you're probably in the same area in the 90s, Tegretol, Topamax, Depakote, Keppra, Lamictal, the list goes on. And ironically, I'm in assisted living now, and I work with the elderly and dementia, and I'm seeing all these same medications. I didn't know that. I'm like, well, I was on Depakote, and people are like, what? And we think of Depakote for the elderly. No, it's a big medication, and it has such side effects, like you felt, saw, and lived, that you're sluggish, you're tired, you can't talk. I was in inside sales, and I couldn't always communicate very, very well. It's like you have these thoughts and everything doesn't process. And so go on with your story here. After the surgery, did you get off medication right away, or what happened in the next few years?
So the approach back then was to keep a post-op brain surgery patient on seizure medication for 2 years, just as a precaution. And if the person went seizure-free for those 2 years, then the neurologist would wean the person off seizure medication. And that's exactly what my neurologist did. So I didn't have any seizures for 2 years. I was taking Dilantin during that time. Dilantin is a older medication too. So I was on Dilantin for those 2 years. And because I didn't have any seizures during that time, my doctor did wean me off. And, during that time, being weaned off seizure medication, I started experiencing some auras. And back in that day, they didn't call auras seizures. It was the idea that the person knew that a seizure was about to happen. Well, in these days, they call those auras simple partial seizures. So, in reality, I was still having seizures, what we call auras. But nevertheless, I stayed off seizure medication, and I would still have those auras maybe once a year. It wasn't any big deal. I didn't become unconscious, anything like that. It was just a sensation that I experienced every so often. And, at my 2-year checkup, I had an EEG done, and my neurologist told me that he didn't see any seizure activity on the EEG reading. And that was, the basis for taking me off seizure medication, because they didn't see any seizure activity.
Okay.
And so, I was off seizure medication for years, but roughly 10 years ago, I started experiencing stronger auras, and I was concerned about it. So I was evaluated by a neurologist, and they did recognize seizure activity in me. So I went back on seizure medication. I didn't lose my driver's license, but, so I'm still on seizure medication just as a precaution. But nevertheless, I live an active life. I'm a special ed teacher. I have 3 college degrees. I have an undergrad in elementary education, a master's degree in special ed, and a master's degree in school administration.
That's wonderful. You made an amazing comeback in life. And I'd like to talk about the auras too, because that was a big thing in my life. From the time I had the football injury in '88 that caused it, I had auras after that too. And people don't know what auras are, but I could tell we didn't have a name back then, right? It was like you didn't have petite mal or small mal. I didn't know what was going on, but I was kind of zoning out, and then I'd come back and I'd feel dizzy, but it was really a sickness, butterflies in the stomach, tingling down my arm, and it almost felt like death. And I swear, to me, I've died so many times because it felt like I was kind of having if the auras got worse, like I was about to have a seizure, but I didn't. Mm-hmm. And then when I finally did in '92, they put me on the medication for the first time, and they said, "Oh, you were having a sign of epilepsy." I don't know what they called it back then, but it was definitely not auras. It was something else. And I was having them all the time. Right. And it's really difficult to function when you're talking to somebody. And so I would think I was talking correctly. The small mal would come up, the petite mal, the aura, and I'd be like, and I'd be gibberish, and I'd see this look, and they'd be like, "Oh my gosh." And I'm like, what? And then it would go away in 10 seconds or 20 seconds. Is that how you experienced it too, or felt?
Yeah, some of what you just described, I went through. It was more, sometimes it was like a heat rush through my body. Other times I describe it as like a spirit was taking over my body. And that sounds really crazy, but there's no other way to describe it. It's like there's some other uncontrolled spirit inside of me. Here again, it's, how it is.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Hard to explain it to other people. I kind of correlate it with, if you've never eaten chocolate cake, you don't know what chocolate cake tastes like. If you're that 1 in 26 people that has eaten chocolate cake in life, the other 25 people don't understand the taste of chocolate cake. But how would you explain that to a person? There's just certain things in life you have to experience to totally understand.
You have to live it and be through it to understand it. We can't write about it. And that's part of people reading it and trying to understand it. When I go to a neurologist, or I used to all the time, I knew they didn't understand it. Of course,
Yeah,
they couldn't understand it. If they had epilepsy, they wouldn't be a doctor. So I
right.
respect that. But they would say, well, try this medication, and just rotating every 6 months, every year. And the medication began wearing off. But a big part I was going to ask you about is your diet, your lifestyle, your sleep patterns. Are you really good with that? And has that helped too?
Yeah, and that's a good point. I understand that it is important to get plenty of sleep, which is true with anybody, but for people with epilepsy, being sleep deprived can trigger more seizures. And going back years, like to my childhood, it was back in the 70s when artificial sweeteners came out, and I was in the second grade during that time. And I remember having soft drinks that had artificial sweetener in them, and I would go into a seizure within like 30 minutes
Wow.
of consuming any artificial sweetener.
But you were that awake. That's amazing too, that even at a young age, you paid attention to that, because that is
Mhm.
huge in my life. And I think it should be huge in the lives of other epileptics. If you
Right.
drank that sweetener at that young age, you were affected by it, right?
Yeah. And because artificial sweeteners were so new,
Yeah.
doctors didn't know that it could impact people with epilepsy. And it was in more recent years, and maybe it was, it could have been 15 years ago, but in more modern times, it's been proven that artificial sweeteners can trigger seizures in people with epilepsy.
And that's
So,
the ingredients in Coke, right? Like in drinks, soft drinks, they have that. There's a name for it. I can't think of it right now, but those ingredients that are not natural, and they get in your system, and they can cause that, right?
that's true. And, there's other artificial,
Aspartame. Sorry, I had to think of it, like aspartame or other
yeah,
ingredients.
equal,
Yeah.
equals, um, because I've read that artificial sweeteners almost react like alcohol in the brain. So people with epilepsy often have seizures if they do consume alcohol. That's not true with everybody, but if you consider that, like aspartame, let's just say, reacts in the brain like alcohol, you can understand why it would trigger a seizure in some people.
Yeah.
And also as a child, I figured out that if I did not have a standard meal and I had a lot of snacks, I had a lot of sweet items, I was more prone to have a seizure. And so even as a child and a teenager, I made sure that I had a substantial meal 3 times a day. You know how it is.
Again, that's amazing too, because in the 70s we didn't have that going on. In the 80s and everything, it was just you didn't have ingredients on the food packages, right? You didn't know what you're eating, you just ate it. And to pay attention to it, I really think that's so key for the listeners out there, to read your ingredients, understand them, look at the side effects, red dye 40, yellow dye, all these chemicals that are in there that cause ADD, ADHD, but also in us, in epileptic people, can cause triggers.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with you, right?
Yes, it is. And, that's the type of thing that at least back then, neurologists didn't mention or ask about. Now there is I think it's called the ketogenic diet. So, that's been around for a handful of years. So I must say there was some knowledge of how foods could impact a person with epilepsy and trigger seizures. But in the big picture of things, diet was not something that neurologists mentioned, at least to me. It was something that was more of a trial and error thing in my life. And my mom paid attention to what I ate also. you have to be your own advocate. You have to listen to your own body. If you're a parent of a child with epilepsy, I would recommend paying attention to like what your child ate that day when they had a seizure, how stressed they were, what physical activities were they involved in, and anything else. You know, I've heard that some people have seizures just by hearing a certain sound. And we know that flashing lights can
Yeah,
trigger
the
a
light, right? Yeah.
So, you know, for parents of a child with epilepsy, I would just recommend, like, even for a full month, write down what your child eats, what activities they're involved in, when they had a seizure, and, you know, what was going on in their life that day when they had a seizure. Because then you could come to a conclusion about what triggers your child's seizures and what you could do differently to help your child have fewer seizures.
Yeah, a big part of it is I would recommend too. I mean, we have so much in common in what you're saying is that a diet journal, keeping track of everything you eat. And, you know, I feel like I'm going to write a book and have co-authors like yourself in there to talk about our stories, but also to have something that helps epileptics motivate them to keep track of, okay, here comes the aura. What did I eat? What did I drink? How did I sleep? Who was I around? What stress level was going on? Mine always happened at work. You mentioned alcohol. I was a functioning alcoholic for years, but if I got off the alcohol, I would say that was the worst thing. I would try to sober up for a while, and it would make it worse. It was like my body had to keep alcohol in me. You know, delirium tremors are common in alcoholics because they come off alcohol. Those are seizures, and DTs can turn into seizures. But mine thing was epilepsy, and it's weird. My body got used to alcohol. So if I came off, it was different, and it was a problem. So coming off it was horrible. And just mentioning this to everybody out there to pay attention to your body as we're talking about here, and pay attention to what you're eating and journaling and everything, right?
Yep, that is for sure. And, you know, you had mentioned, you know, neurologists can prescribe medication, but if they've never had a seizure, they don't know. And
Yeah.
it goes back to, like you're saying, listen to your body, draw your own conclusions about what could trigger a seizure, and just advocate for yourself, take care of yourself. You know, and I'm not here to give medical advice. I will just say that my mom read about supplements and minerals when I was a kid, and she just wanted to figure out if there were certain supplements that I was missing that could help control my seizures. And she read that calcium, magnesium, and zinc can help control seizures. And so she had me take a calcium, magnesium, and zinc supplement. And nevertheless, my seizures were better controlled. So here again, all I'm going to say to that is, you know, do your research, figure out what may be triggering your seizures. You know, there's so much more known about supplements these days and what could possibly be causing seizures. So do your research. Here again, I'm not trying to give medical advice.
No.
It's just,
Yeah, we don't give medical advice, and I agree. And I have a quote in my book here, and it says, "There's no body like your body. You're not just anybody. You're not just somebody. You're not a nobody. You are the one
right,
body that matters most." So pay attention
right,
to your body. And when somebody says, a doctor, of course, prescribed this, I actually personally, when I was taking the medication, I've been off of it for 11 years now. I don't, you know, the body's changed, everything's changed. I'm sober. But when I was taking it, I would be on new medication. They would say, take 3 in the morning, 3 at night. I would start with 1 in the morning, personally. This is me, and 1 at night, and then 2, and I would slowly get onto it. Because if I just slam these pills and they're all new to me, I would feel like I was lost. And I'm going to show you an example here real quick. Ironically, I'd feel like I was wading in water waist deep. There's a fisherman out here. I don't know if you can see him, but he is
yeah,
fishing out here, and he's waist deep in water, but that's how I felt with epilepsy. I was stuck. I was trying to fish my way out of life, find the right way out. And I felt like if I just slammed all this medication, I was out of it for a week, 2 weeks, and then finally got used to it and understood that I need to slow down and pay attention to my body, right?
For sure. Here again, you have to be your own advocate.
Yes.
No one else can tell you what you're going through.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Just be your own advocate. If you're a parent of a child with epilepsy, be your own advocate and realize that your child too needs social opportunities. They still need to do the common things that kids do. That does not mean take unusual or, unreasonable risk, but, still allow your child to be involved in seizure or in sports and things where they can grow emotionally and socially.
That's wonderful. And I appreciate the interview and everything related to it. It's kind of like the shirt says, and my quote says, Control, Alt, Delete, reset your mind, reset your life. And you did that, and I've done that, and we're helping others out there do that. So let everybody out there know how they can get a hold of you, your book too. I'm going to have a link down here in the description for your book, but tell them a little bit about that.
Okay, so my book is available at Barnes & Noble, on Amazon, and you can order my book through your local bookstore. And I do have a Facebook page. You can just search for In My Right Mind, My Life with Epilepsy.
And I'll put that link down here too on the YouTube channel. So I'll have some links to the book. And it's wonderful to see that, because in the areas of coming back in life, just stay positive in life. And that's what I want to help other people. And that's why we're doing these interviews, being thankful and grateful, attitude of gratitude, taking your life to the next level and not giving up on life, and being there for others, right?
That's for sure. And
prayer.
I
call it meditation, awareness, and prayer. MAP.
Yeah, for sure. Just want to add, people with epilepsy can still do things in the community. If you're one that is at home a lot, think of something that you can do positive to get involved in the community, whether it be a sport, a part-time job, volunteering someplace. There's always small things that you can do to get involved in the community and improve yourself in some way.
Exactly. And we'll be here for you. And I mean, for everybody listening out there, both of us are here for you. So reach out to both of us, one of us, if you have epilepsy, if you have questions, if you need help in any area. I appreciate your time today, and we're going to grow from here. And any last words that you want to say out there to the viewers?
Just keep up the fight, Don't lose hope. Reach out to other people that have epilepsy, but don't lose hope and keep in the fight.
Exactly. Les Brown, in my co-authored book, Living with Heart, said, if you can look up, you can get up. That's his famous quote. Les Brown is a speaker. So I always enjoyed that. So thank you, everybody, and have a beautiful day. This beautiful sunrise and sunset in life, and enjoy life to the fullest.
All right. Thank you.
Where the air makes you sure people don't know you. Trust is joy. Don't even have pictures, just memories to hold. Grows sweeter each season as we slow